Hello everyone, what is up? It is me, AlbyMTG, and for today's video I will be bringing you guys another episode of something I've done in the past that you guys seem to enjoy, and this is 10 modern staples that you guys can pick up for less than $1 a piece. These cards see quite a bit of modern play. I tried to narrow it down to cards that we're seeing play in at least more than one deck. I didn't want to pick cards that were specific to one deck only, and so I wanted to pick stuff that was, just kind of around in the format that you might end up seeing in a couple different archetypes instead. And so another thing that I want to do before starting this video is, of course, I want to say thank you to my newest patron. He has quite the long name, and so I very much apologize if I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, but I believe I'm saying thank you to Jayathiswaran, is how I would pronounce this, but of course if I'm saying it incorrectly, be sure to let me know down low in the comment section, that way I can pronounce it correctly in the future. Again, thank you so much, Jayathiswaran. Again, if that's how you pronounce your name, thank you so much for supporting me on the Patreon page. I very, very much appreciate it, and with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into the video. So the first card we have here is Arbor Elf. Arbor Elf you can pick up for only 25 cents a piece, being printed in several different sets: World Wake, Masters 25, and M13. You can see here sees a lot of play in Modern. Right now, not in a ton of like Tier 1 decks, but the main interaction that makes Arbor Elf so good is because of the card Utopia Sprawl. Utopia Sprawl plus Arbor Elf can allow you to generate 4 mana on turn 2, which is super, super strong because there are a lot of powerful 4-drops, especially if you're in a green-based deck. There are a lot of very strong creatures at 4 converted mana cost, so Arbor Elf plus Utopia Sprawl ends up being quite the little combo. Utopia Sprawl being a little bit more in terms of monetary value than Arbor Elf is. Utopia Sprawl is quite a bit over $1. However, I believe it was also reprinted in Masters 25, I should say. But the big draw to Arbor Elf is the fact that it's able to work very well with Utopia Sprawl, and notably because it says untap target forest, it works well with cards like the Shocklands that have multiple types on them. Say I had a breeding pool and I needed to cast a card that was, let's say I wanted to cast a Tempest Djinn for some reason, or I guess we'll go with like a Goblin Chain Whirler. That's a card most people are fairly familiar with in Standard right now. So the card cost me red in order for me to play it. Let's say turn 1 I play Stomping Ground and then play this Arbor Elf. I can go ahead and tap on turn 2. I can go ahead and tap my Stomping Ground for red mana, use Arbor Elf to untap it, because these Shocklands have both land types on them. They're both forests and mountains for Stomping Ground, for example. So even though it says untap target forest, I can again tap it for red mana, and then let's say I play another red source as my second. I can go ahead and play this Arbor Elf on turn 1, but still manage to play Goblin Chain Whirler on turn 3 or on turn 2 as well. So it's the kind of card that allows you to mana fix quite well as ramp you quite well as well. So Arbor Elf is a very, very good little card here. Alright, sorry about that, I had to sneeze, of course, did that off camera, didn't want to make you guys listen to that. So the next card we have here on the list is Thought Scour. Thought Scour ends up seeing a lot of modern play along with Snapcaster Mage, but it also goes in a bunch of different just graveyard strategies. It works very well with Snapcaster Mage because it basically fuels your graveyard for future Snapcaster Mages to flash back the spells that you end up milling away. But it can also work just very well with much cheaper cards, for example, like since this is basically budget focused here, this list, we're looking at cards that are less than $1 here. It works very well with other cards like just recursive cards like green black is generally 2 colors that can help you return things from the graveyard back to your hand, maybe get some additional value out of those. And so Thought Scour is the type of card that ends up going in those decks as well if they end up making them Sultai versions. It's just a nice way to fuel your graveyard, and it replaces itself too. It does just exactly what you want it to do. Sees a lot of play in Grixis Death Shadow as well, because it's fueling your graveyard for Gurmag Angler and Delve threats as well. So Thought Scour is just a very, very good card. Very cheap card right now at only 33 cents, but it's the kind of card that sees a decent amount of play, maybe a little bit less play now than it has in the past, especially with Opt being printed. Opt has pretty much replaced Thought Scour in most decks, but again, the decks that have a lot of graveyard synergy going on with them will end up choosing Thought Scour instead. The next card we have here is a card that I certainly did not think would see any modern play, but that is Zhalfirin Void. Zhalfirin Void is a nice simple card, taps for a colorless, but when it enters the battlefield you scry one. And so where we're seeing Zhalfirin Void showing up is in the combo decks that aren't very heavy on mana. On the decks that are looking for specific pieces, so things like Lantern Control, where they're not really looking to cast, 3 colors worth of spells. They're just looking to essentially cast a bunch of artifacts and then, get you dead that way. But Zhalfirin Void is also seeing play a lot in the Eldrazi decks. There are a few different variants of Eldrazi. There's like Eldrazi Tron, just like regular Eldrazi Stompy, the colorless versions. There's a few different multicolored versions of Eldrazi as well. Maybe you'll see like a Bant Eldrazi, you'll see like black-white Eldrazi is something that you'll see sometimes. Mono-red Eldrazi is something that shows up occasionally. Mono-black Eldrazi, you guys get the point. So Zhalfirin Void allows these decks to kind of, because you're playing the Eldrazi cards, if you don't have an Eldrazi Temple, it can kind of seem a little bit clunky at times, and so the Zhalfirin Void is a nice way to scry away additional lands in the late game, while at the same time trying to scry you into your Eldrazi Temples or into your big threats like Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher that can just end the game quite easily. So Zhalfirin Void showing up in a couple different decks. I certainly did not expect this card to see any modern play when it was printed, but now it's showing that even though it's just nice and simple, tapping for a colorless is quite good with the Eldrazi, and being able to scry gives you just enough value to leverage wanting to play something like a Zhalfirin Void in those decks. The next card we have here is Grapeshot. Grapeshot goes in the decks where you're trying to play multiple spells in a turn. Particularly Storm and Pure Steel Paladin combo are the decks that you'll end up seeing Grapeshot the most. It's kind of interesting that Storm is such a good deck right now, but it's also one of the cheapest Tier 1 modern decks that you can put together. In terms of, like Tron or Humans, you're going to be spending like over $1,000 on your deck. When it comes to Storm, you're looking at close to like $200, $300, and part of that is because some of the cards that are just, key pieces to the deck are very cheap, like your 50-cent Grapeshots here. Empty the Warrens is another card that you use to kill your opponents. Again, that card's like less than 50 cents too. You're just playing a bunch of cantrips, which are relatively cheap as well. The big money pieces there being cards like Baral. Gifts Ungiven isn't even that expensive. It's only like $4 a piece right now or something like that too. And then Past in Flames got reprinted, so that's fairly cheap now too. So Storm is a very, very good budget option if you're wanting to like get started in Modern, but you don't want to start out with like a budget deck as in like a $50 deck, but you don't want to start out with something expensive either, like $500 plus. Storm is just a nice little deck, kind of in the middle there, where you can spend a decent amount of money for still having quite the good deck, and it's a good little introductory deck into Modern. So Grapeshot seeing play again in basically just all the combo decks that are looking to play multiple spells in one turn, preferably 20 of them, but even sometimes just Grapeshot for 10 to 15 can sometimes be good enough with Grapeshot. The next card we're going to be taking a look at here is a card that I've actually made an entire video about, talking about just this card and its implications in Modern before. This was the card that I originally had a video planned in the first week or two that M19 came out. I had this video plan where I was going to talk about all the M19 cards that are showing up in new Modern decks, and basically all of them were just Militia Bugler. It was just Militia Bugler showing up in this deck, and that deck, and this deck, and that deck, and all of these other cards were just not seeing any play. And so I basically just, scrapped that entire video idea and then just made an entire video about Militia Bugler. Here I am again talking about how good this card is. You can see it's less than 50 cents now because it's in Standard, very heavily opened right now because M19 is the most recent set. And the places that you'll see Militia Bugler are in Humans, and you'll see it in the green-white kind of collected company, as well as just kind of value sort of decks. Those are the kind of decks, like hitting a Bugler off of collected company allows you to just generate so much value. You basically get the Militia Bugler, you get some other creature off of your collected company, the Militia Bugler triggers, you get another creature that you can put into your hand, and so much value happens. The fact that this thing has Vigilance too can sometimes be relevant, especially in Humans, because you're going to end up putting counters on this thing with things like Thali's Lieutenant, making it a relatively big Vigilance threat as well, so it's good for attacking and blocking. I know when I was playing in the top 8 of a PvTQ against Humans a couple weeks ago, that became pretty annoying for me. Was I couldn't quite attack through the Militia Bugler because I had something like Scavenging Ooze with maybe like 1 or 2 counters on it, something like that. But my opponent had played several Thalia's lieutenants, and was making the Militia Bugler big enough that it was just, you know, a big enough threat on offense to hit me and a big enough threat on defense that I couldn't get any additional damage through. So it became quite the annoying card for me to play against. But I ended up winning that matchup, which is what matters. But yeah, Militia Bugler just showing up as a fantastic card, nice little value engine here for white-based decks. I've seen it tried as well in Death and Taxes sometimes too, because Death and Taxes will occasionally you know, play flicker effects as well, things like Restoration Angel and Flicker Wisp as ways to flicker the Militia Bugler to get additional value off of it, find things like your Thalia, find things like your Leon and Arbiter, those kind of cards. The next card we're going to take a look at here is Chromatic Sphere. Chromatic Sphere is worse than Chromatic Star. Chromatic Star is the one that sees significantly more play, but in the decks that play Chromatic Star, most of them are also just playing Chromatic Sphere as well. Especially in Tron is where you'll see Chromatic Sphere a lot, but you'll also see Chromatic Sphere in things like, whatchamacallit, it's slipping my mind right now. This is so bad of me. How am I forgetting the name of this deck? Krark-Clan Ironworks. There we go. Why did that just... I apologize. It also sees play in Krark-Clan Ironworks. It's less good in Krark-Clan Ironworks than Star, because Star, if you sacrifice the Star, then to the KCI, the trigger on Star is not part of the same text line as it is here for Sphere. So you actually get to draw a card even if you don't activate the ability on Star. For Sphere, you do have to activate the ability, but it can give you just enough ability to generate some colors of mana. Most of the time, you'll be seeing Ancient Stirrings cast off of the Chromatic Spheres and the Chromatic Stars. Again, Chromatic Star, like I said, it's the better version, so it is a little bit more expensive, but Chromatic Sphere sees play in just as many decks as Star does, and so it's a very, very good card to pick up. Also sees play in some Pauper decks as well, but we're talking about modern staples here, so Chromatic Sphere, just again, another solid pickup. Flicker Wisp is a card that I actually mentioned a little bit earlier when we were talking about Militia Bugler. This card is the type of card that sees play in the Death and Taxes variants, and I've actually seen a couple like blue-white value flicker kind of decks going around on Magic Online recently. They're not super big quite yet, but they're starting to see a little bit more play. I think people just like the idea of being able to just achieve so much value by doing all the flickering and things like that. Flicker Wisp also, I believe, sees play in the Dubious Challenge decks. Not that that's, you know, a selling point, but it is something that, you know, you can use to get back your Emrakul after your opponent Dubious challenges, and they take the Emrakul, and you can Flicker Wisp with it. That's something you can do. For Dubious Challenge, for those of you that don't know, the card is so bad, but there is a very, 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 very fringe deck in Modern that plays Dubious Challenge, and essentially the way it goes is you get some sort of a Flicker creature, Glimmerpoint, Stagger, Flicker Wisp, and then you get an Emrakul off of the Dubious Challenge, and then no matter what your opponent takes, you end up with an Emrakul, so your opponent just ends up in a bad position, and you get a 4-mana Emrakul, which works out very nicely, and so Flicker Wisp sees play in that deck, but really the big selling point of Flicker Wisp is like these blue-white value lists and these Death and Taxes variants. That's really where Flicker Wisp is shining right now. The next card we have here is probably I would say if I had to rank these cards, I would put this card as the highest up on this list. This card is so good. Monastery Swiftspear is just possibly one of the best 1-drops ever printed. In terms of red 1-drops, it's either the best or the second best. It's basically personal preference as to whether you prefer Monastery Swiftspear over Goblin Guide. A lot of people prefer, you know, a lot of the decks that are playing one of these will end up playing both of these. Monastery Swiftspear, of course, sees play in Modern Burn as well as like Legacy Burn as well, because the card is just so good. And then the Prowess triggers allow your burn spells to create additional damage too with the Monastery Swiftspears. Basically, if you're playing almost any red aggressive deck, you want to be playing Monastery Swiftspears in it. It's just a fantastic card, a nice way to get in some damage early, and yeah, Monastery Swiftspear, just a fantastic card, and you can see it's slowly coming down here a little bit after this printing in Iconic Masters, and so it's now under $1, which means I'm able to put it on this video, and so yeah, just an absolutely fantastic card if you like playing red aggressive decks. The next card we have up here is Duskwatch Recruiter. Duskwatch Recruiter, again, sees play in the decks that are like the green-white company variants that are trying to just generate a lot of value and in terms of creatures. This allows them to, you know, look for additional creatures here, but it also sees play in the combo decks involving Vizier of Remedies and Devoted Druid. Once you make the infinite mana, if you have a Duskwatch Recruiter out, you can then use the mana, filter it through Duskwatch Recruiter, and then just search your deck for any creature you want. Most of the time it ends up being a Walking Ballista since you have infinite mana. But Duskwatch Recruiter, again, just a very good card and sees play in the green-white company decks, the even like Bant company decks too. You'll sometimes see that, like the Knight of the Reliquary, Retreat to Coral Helm combo decks. You'll see Duskwatch Recruiter in there. But then again, also in the combo decks as well. And here you can see the flip side, Krellin Horde Howler as well, making your creatures cost less, so that's where you're really seeing this card shine, is in the creature decks. And then onto the final card we have for today's video, Sheffet Dunes from Hour of Devastation. Again, speaking of standard legal lands that I did not expect to see on this list, similar to Zhalfirin Void, but Sheffet Dunes actually makes a lot more sense. Sheffet Dunes is seeing play in decks like the white-based Eldrazi decks, so things like white-black Eldrazi, Bant Eldrazi, those sort of things, because it has the ability to tap for white if you need to tap for white, or to tap for colorless if you need the colorless restriction for, to cast your Eldrazi. But at the same time, it's also starting to see play in things like Death and Taxes as well, because you're playing smaller creatures, and the cost of playing something like Sheffet Dunes is very minimal. It acts as a white source, and then at the same time can be an additional way to get through some damage with your smaller creatures, because you're not really playing a ton of big creatures in things like Death and Taxes. You're playing generally smaller creatures, so it can be a way to turn your Thalia into a 3-power creature instead of a 2-power creature, which can make the difference. Turn your 2/2s into 3/3s. You even have a couple evasive threats like Flicker Wisp and Restoration Angel, which can get in additional points of damage with the Sheffet Dunes. And another place where this is starting to see a little bit of play, usually is just like a one-of, is in the Bant Spirits decks. Occasionally you'll see the blue-white Spirits deck show up as well, and this will be more of a 2-of, or possibly even a 3-of in the blue-white versions, but really in the Bant versions, you generally only see it as a 1-of. The Sheffet Dunes, again, because all of your threats are evasive, in these Spirit decks, it's another way to just pump through additional damage, and the opportunity cost of playing something like Sheffet Dunes is super low, and so it allows you to just, get through additional damage without needing to pay too much of a cost, especially when all of your threats are evasive, like in the Spirits deck. So thank you guys so much for watching the video. Again, we'll go through and talk about every single card here again. Arbor Elf, Thought Scour, Zhalfirin Void, Grapeshot, Militia Bugler, Chromatic Sphere, Flicker Wisp, Monastery Swiftspear, Duskwatch Recruiter, and finally Sheffet Dunes. These are 10 modern staples. You can pick them now for under $1 a piece. If you guys did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like on it, and of course subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content similar to this. Of course, you guys enjoyed the last one, and you guys let me know that you wanted to see another one. If you guys want to see additional ones of these in the future, be sure to let me know again, and I'll look for another 10, modern cards, another 10 modern staples that are less than $1, that you guys can start picking up now. Again, hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, let me know down below in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I will see you guys here next time for another Magic the Gathering video. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video, where I go over 10 modern staples that you can pick up for less than $1. Of course, at the end of all of my videos, I love to give a huge shout out and thank you to all of my patrons over at the Patreon. Link will be down below in the description if you're interested in checking that out. So, of course, big thank you to Jayathi Swaran. Again, if I'm saying your name incorrectly, be sure to let me know down below in the comments so I can correct it in the future. Big thank you to Daniel, Jeremy, AlbyMTG, and Jason as well. Thank you guys so much for the support on the Patreon page. Like I said, if you're interested in checking out the Patreon page, the link will be down below in the description. You never need to feel obligated to support me on the Patreon page. A like on the video is, still just a million times better than what most people will give me. So I very, very much appreciate anything that you guys can do to help out. And thank you guys so much for watching the video.